a lot of these dumbass projects that I could have told you and Aaron Sparrow could have told you were really just bad ideas are getting chopped, and there's a lot more. It feels like accountability in the future for DC Comics, DC Films, whatnot. The response has not been great. Here to talk to me about that is Aaron Sparrow. How you doing, Aaron?
I'm doing fantastic. I like to see houses being cleaned.
You must be excited about this. It seems like there's been no accountability within like DC Films, DC Comics for so many years. They've wanted to hotshot their movie universe, like in the vein of the MCU, but they hadn't wanted to do the groundwork, the building, the foundation of the universe. And they've just had bad idea upon bad idea upon bad idea.
No. You've got, of course, you've got the people who would never have paid to see these movies anyways out there complaining on Twitter, making a big deal. But I think that David Zaslav, realizes rightly that Twitter, not a real place. These people's opinions don't matter. They're not consumers. They don't have money to spend. They just spend all day on Twitter complaining and demanding things that they are never going to pay for. So, it's a sensible undertaking that he's on, just slashing these things that are going to damage the brand further. Everybody already has a negative opinion of DC movies in general, and adding more fuel to that fire is not beneficial to them. So cutting these projects, eating that loss, but actually saving money on marketing things that are going to fail, that's actually a really wise business decision, despite what what the hand wringing on Twitter says.
Yes, there's been a lot of accusations of racism and just kind of some silly stuff. We'll get into that here in a moment. But David Zaslav explained himself at his first kind of investor call this week. He said he wants a very similar structure to what Alan Horn, Bob Iger, and Kevin Feige put together very effectively at Disney. He thinks we can build a much stronger, sustainable growth business out of DC. As part of that, we are going to focus on quality. We are not going to release any film before it's ready. DC is something we can make better. It's obviously that he thinks that's one of the priorities through there is that they need to have quality associated with the brand. By all accounts, the Batgirl movie was being viewed. They were having screenings. The feedback was overwhelmingly negative, that it was a bad movie.
When your studio has a reputation for putting out bad films, that's going to affect you more and more. You're going to see less and less return when you put these things out, especially if they are continually bad. Even if you get a good one in there, people aren't going to go to see it because they don't trust it. Pixar as a brand used to be infallible. I would go see a Pixar movie. I knew it was going to be good. I didn't know anything about Up. I went to that movie knowing it was going to be good just because it was Pixar. And it was. And, this is the way that Pixar was before they got rid of John Lasseter. Now, of course, Pixar has put out a variety of films that haven't done as well, haven't resonated with the public, haven't had that heart. They just haven't been as good. And now Pixar is no longer a surefire hit. We saw Lightyear flop horribly. Unfortunately, this is the reality of it. When you release a couple of stinkers into theaters, people are going to get upset. And by all accounts, these movies that were coming out under Ann Sarnoff, look at Birds of Prey. That movie was terrible. And if that was the direction that these movies were going to go in, then, yeah, they were going to tank the whole DC universe. You're going to make your brand radioactive for decades. You can get a quick cash grab out of things, but if you don't focus on quality, people are going to walk away, and then, you've burnt out that goodwill.
Well, and a lot of these DC Comics characters, they're like known worldwide. Not everybody has read all the comic books, but everybody knows who Batman is. They know who Superman is, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, The Flash, the Justice League. These are worldwide known commodities. And if you put out there a bad interpretation of who the characters are, people are going to notice, even if they're not DC Comics fans. And going out there and putting out a Batgirl movie seems strange at the time. It was like, why would you focus in on this character when you haven't properly introduced the character? And then on top of that, of course, you got to do some race swaps with the character. And it didn't really make sense why you would do this anyway. And it feels like this is just David Zaslav cleaning up the mess that was left behind, waiting for him when he took over.
That's exactly what it is. It's him cleaning up this mess, preventing further damage, and looking towards a brighter future for the DC universe. And we should be excited about that. The fact that he wants to put Superman front and center, we should all be excited about that as comic book fans, because Superman is the pinnacle of what we should aspire to as human beings, in superhero form. It's fantastic. So hopefully they bring Henry Cavill back in, because I think Henry Cavill is a great Superman. Unfortunately, under Zack Snyder, he didn't really get the chance to play Superman. He was playing some other darker version that was more relatable to us as human beings, which I disagree with fundamentally. I don't want a Superman that's more like us. I want us to aspire to be more like Superman. And I think that's where the character works. When you try and bring him down and you try and make him more flawed and relatable, and you have him murder Zod and just all the things that, just the kind of the pettiness of like destroying that trucker, that jerk trucker's livelihood by smashing all the trees through it, like in Man of Steel. I think that you drag the character down, you make him petty and you make him small, and Superman should not be that. So hopefully this new direction is we're going to focus on Superman, we're going to focus on Batman, we're going to focus on Wonder Woman. Once we get that Trinity right, then we can start doing spin-off films. But what DC was doing under Ann Sarnoff was just really slapdash, scattershot, throw out whatever we've got. What hero can we grab? Okay, it's a redheaded character. Okay, let's race swap them and put them in this movie. And we can't get Ben Affleck anymore. We'll just do a convoluted thing and bring in Michael Keaton, and do Batman Beyond in a way that nobody wants to see Batman Beyond. Nobody wants to see Batman Beyond Batgirl. Everybody wants to see Michael Keaton play Batman with Terry McGinnis, and not a race swap Terry McGinnis.
Yeah, it's kind of strange. I don't think anyone expected David Zaslav, the guy from Discovery that was kind of coming in here, to be the guy that's going to champion what's right and the good ideas for DC Comics. But that's exactly what's happening. Also in that investor call, he said, we're not going to launch a movie until it's ready. We're not going to go to the movie to make a quarter, and we're not going to put the movie out unless we believe in it. And that's it, particularly with DC, where we think we want to pivot and we want to elevate and we want to focus. The objective is to grow the DC brand, to grow the DC characters, but also our job is to protect the DC brand, and that's what we're going to do. You would expect these words to be coming out of the mouth of Jim Lee, who certainly has a lot more invested into the DC brand itself, but it's really an outsider like David Zaslav understanding the value of the DC brand, that you have to protect the integrity of the characters, and everything that you put out is a reflection on what you believe in DC. I just find it shocking that he's the one that's saying this.
Well, I mean, the problem with Jim Lee is that, I follow him on Instagram, and he seems way more invested in going to movie premieres and taking pictures, with his wife on the red carpet and kind of living that life than he does actually getting in and fixing DC Comics. I don't know what happened to him. I don't know, what his... This used to be the guy who ran Wildstorm, which was wildly successful, and he knew what sold. And I don't know if just being part of DC's corporate landscape has completely neutered him, but he just seems to have no idea of what to do anymore, or no interest. And I think a lot of that comes from, being rich and not being hungry anymore. You're not being hungry to accomplish new things and to break new ground and to do those sorts of things. And there's all kinds of editors out there right now that would love to get in there and love to restore kind of, the DC universe to what it was, and these characters to who they were, and, make them recognizable again. But unfortunately, they're not the ones that are hired. They're not the ones that are in power. I listen to... I listen to Joe. He tells me ideas that he has for different comics and things like that and how to improve them. He's got a pitch for Wonder Woman that should be like, if I was in charge of DC, I would green light immediately. Like, he's just got such a good story idea and such a good sense of, what would actually elevate this character and sell them. And by the way, it includes putting top level talent on the art team for Wonder Woman, which she almost never gets. She's had some great artists over the years, but you never see like a Greg Capullo or anybody like that, who's really hot, at DC drawing a Wonder Woman book. There's all kinds of people out there that I talk to every day that have better pitches than are coming out of the, the friends of the editors that, are being hired due to nepotism and, due to identity. It's ridiculous.
It's going to be a big wake-up call for a lot of people that meritocracy and success is going to weigh in on your future with the company. I don't think a lot of people, at DC Comics, DC Films, anything associated with the characters has ever had that thought in their mind, within the last few years, that what I do with the character matters. And if people respond well to it and buy the comic book, I'm a success. I don't think they've ever thought about it that way. And we're kind of seeing that fall out with a couple of creators out there. But I think we're in for a lot of people losing their minds that they're going to be expected to be successful now.
Well, I think we're seeing that a lot. A lot of the comics professionals that are currently, hired at these companies, we're starting to see them panic. We're starting to see them put out their panic on Twitter, even when they're trying to be smug about it. I think they realize that a reckoning is coming. That, we're moving back to merit-based hiring. We're moving back to, you've got to perform. You've got to, coffee is for closers, man. It's only for closers. So you've got to actually sell books. You've got to actually engage fans. You've got to make people excited about what you're doing. Teenie Howard can talk about how, oh, this is the most success, it's so great what she's done, and have this arrogance that she's done something really great by making Betsy Braddock and Rachel Summers girlfriends. But it didn't move any books. So what did it really amount to? Nobody's going to talk about these stories in 20 years unless they're talking about the worst period in X-Men history. Unless they're talking about, the worst time in comics history. Those are the only ways these stories are ever going to be mentioned. They're not classic. They're not interesting. And these creators are not getting hired on merit, and they're not maintaining their jobs on merit. And I think that's what we're going to see, especially at DC. Once that Eye of Sauron turns to the actual comics division, right now he's focused on bigger fish, but once he turns and sees what's going on at the comics division, I think it's going to be a bloodbath.
Well, we do have some people that have been speaking out on behalf of Batgirl, just some real not smart things, let's put it that way. Not shockingly, Heather Antos is among those, talking about Batgirl being canceled. Warner Brothers, we need to cut $3 billion in costs by the end of the year. Also, Warner Brothers kills $70 million Batgirl film. The understanding of what David Zaslav is doing is, yes, we've spent $70 million on the film, but we still have to market it. We still have to finish it. And there are more costs involved with the film to finish it. And if we want to put it in theaters, we might have to spend another $70 million just to get it there. Cutting your losses is saving on that $3 billion because that's money that's been earmarked for future spending, and it's savings, but it just goes right over her head that he's saving a lot of money there.
Yeah, and it's a tax write-off, so he gets to write it off to the company. So there's savings there. You're not further damaging the brand with bad product. There's savings there. But let's be honest. This is an editor who has put out a lot of bad product. Overseen a lot of bad product that has damaged brands. So, I don't think she's going to get that. And you're also, is David Zaslav, should he really be taking financial advice from an adult in their 30s who had to crowdfund a new work computer? Didn't have enough savings set aside in their 30s to just go out and buy a simple laptop. They're not that expensive. It's unbelievable to me, the lack of self-awareness that people have sometimes, when they put these tweets out. It's like, you're in a glass house and you're throwing stones.
Well, yeah, you're part of the problem. You're one of the reasons this reckoning is happening.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even understand their part to play in all this. There was another response to this. This one I thought was even worse. This is Vita Ayala. Someone said, WTF is going on in the entertainment world right now, canceling almost finished projects left and right, canceling a successful show after its first season. I imagine they're talking about Naomi there. Something's up. Vita Ayala, who works for DC Comics, racism mostly. It's like it can't be that he's looking at it from a business strategy, or we need to do savings, or we need to pivot the DC product. He can only be a racist to cancel this, what apparently was a very badly received Batgirl movie.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is, you guys are all, your guys' careers are all charity. You haven't moved books. You haven't formed, bridges with fans. Anytime you get put on a book, the sales tank. You got to take some personal responsibility for that. And you know what? I don't entirely blame Vita because, like I've said before, the editors are too scared to actually work with her. You don't have editors in place who are strong and who will actually teach her how to write compelling stories and move her stories in good directions. They're just cranking it through. It's just a content, production machine, and it doesn't matter what it is. So they're more to blame, I think, than these terrible writers, because these writers aren't getting the instruction that they should be getting. But again, that's part of the problem, and that's what David Zaslav is cleaning up. He's looking at merit-based. He's looking at, do you perform? Are you a closer? Are you making this company better? Are you making these characters stronger? And are you leaving them intact for the next person that takes over? That's where this is going to pivot. It was always going to come back to this. This whole Make-A-Wish time of everybody getting to write a comic book, is going to be over. And it was either going to be over because the industry was going to collapse because nobody liked it anymore, or because they finally, the parent companies finally realized we are in this business to make money.
Yeah, I just think it's weird that an employee of the company would go out there and essentially insinuate or blatantly say that David Zaslav must be a racist because Leslie Grace is the new Batgirl there, or because Sasha Calais was going to be the new Supergirl, even though fundamentally when those ideas were announced, people said, this is a bad idea. They explained why, just because of the DC Comics continuity. Obviously, David Zaslav is looking at it from a business perspective, and he's looking at it and saying, the quality isn't here. The idea moving forward does not have merit, and we need to remove it. It doesn't have to be because of race, but that's the only thing that Vita Ayala can kind of, I guess, turn to at this point, because there's no fundamental understanding of quality or what the DC Comics brand is even supposed to be.
No, you're absolutely right. It's the prism through which she's been conditioned to view the world. So that can be the only explanation. It can't be that, I mean, this is the generation of participation trophy kids. It can't be that what you're doing is just no good. It has to be that there's some, nefarious force allied against you. So, I unfortunately, I think one of the big ramifications that are going to come out of this is that they've gone back to the well again and again on this idea of everything being representative and everything being filled with, LGBT content. And, unfortunately, the audience has rejected that again and again and again.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. They've done the same thing over and over, which is the, the basic form of insanity. Do the same thing over and over and expect a new result. It's been rejected kind of every single time. But at this point, you have an adult in the room. He's going to see the amount of failure. And the worst part is you're not going to get anything like experimental or a different take on these characters, because they've seen what the different take has looked like for the last 5 years, and it's failed so spectacularly over and over again. They're going to take no chances for at least another 10 years because they've kind of ruined these properties.
It's unfortunate because, we could see some real risk taking out there. We could see some actual, really great takes on characters, with a little bit of variety and, a little bit of a new perspective. But they're going to kind of, I think, unfortunately, you're absolutely right. They only had one perspective for the longest time. And the one idea they had, and you see it in DC and on the comic side too, is swap a character's sexuality. That's the only marketing idea they've had for a couple of years now. And it's burnt out. It didn't work, but they keep trying to go back to the well because they don't have any other ideas. What you're going to see on the film side is you're going to see the return to, hopefully, the traditional versions of these characters. I'm excited for that. But yeah, it is unfortunate that we're not going to get any kind of, experimentation or any, risks on anything, because unfortunately the companies have lost so much money on this bad idea.
Not surprisingly, I called this. I said, hey, replacing Batman with Batgirl and Superman with Supergirl is a terrible idea. I've talked about it before, how this was going to be a big disaster for DC Films. Thankfully, David Zaslav has shown up and he's fixing it. But this thing was so obvious that it was going to fail, it's not even funny.